The Supreme Court is under fire for a decision on voting rights. It could have wide-ranging implications. The court upheld 2 Arizona voting restrictions. Our justice correspondent, Candace Kelley, is here with the details on that. Good morning, Candace.
Good morning.
So at issue here, how ballots are collected, what happens to votes cast in the wrong location. The court weighed in, gave a ruling. Tell us how they reached that decision and what is it?
Well, the Supreme Court ultimately diluted the Voting Rights Act by agreeing with Arizona, saying that those ballots that are cast at a wrong place and those ballots that are cast by a party member besides that person, perhaps you have a family member cast a ballot, that these would be unacceptable. What they ultimately said was equal openness, not equal outcome, is what matters. And when we look at the Voting Rights Act essentially underscores those specific things in terms of an equal outcome. That is what matters. What matters when you go to a precinct and something happens and you can't get your vote in. So they are going against the grain of the Voting Rights Act, essentially rewriting a part of it, making it so much harder for people to do what they need to do in order to cast their vote. So this is not a win for the Voting Rights Act. Certainly a lot of concern across the board, especially when we have so many states, dozens and dozens, who are creating laws and passing legislation where it looks like it would be supported by the Supreme Court based on this decision that they made yesterday.
This is one of the times that Trump actually gets a win in the Supreme Court. Of course, he appointed 3 of the Supreme Court justices there. 6 felt the way you just described it. 3 did not. What were their dissenting views?
Well, Justice Elena Kagan, she wrote a very fiery and passionate dissent on this. And what she said essentially was that if a single statute represents the best of America, it's the Voting Rights Act. It was 41 pages of dissenting and just going over how the Voting Rights Act is important to the construct of democracy. She said it's great that we have the Voting Rights Act, but it's also terrible that we still have to have the Voting Rights Act. She called it really tragic overall that, we went back decades in terms of what the Voting Rights Act was set out to do. But as you said, as expected, along party lines in terms of the 63 decision. And we've talked over the past few weeks about how there have been so many unanimous decisions, but we knew ultimately when we came to the Voting Rights Act that it would probably turn out like this. And so it rose to our low level of expectations.
So we know what Republicans are up to in, probably 24 states, I think it was, 22 states, maybe it's 40. I don't know who's counting at this point. It's just everywhere. It's spreading. It's infecting everywhere. What does the ruling mean for other legislation like it around the country? Because this could have implications, yes?
Oh, absolutely. This means that anybody else who wants to fight any of these state legislation, any of these laws that are on the table or perhaps been passed, if they want to see the road to the end, the Supreme Court has already spoken, saying that those laws that you might have, again, we're not dealing with equal openness. We're dealing with, that you are dealing with equal openness, not equal outcome that matters. So when you go that route, if you happen to have some specific group that's left out as a result of the law, essentially that's okay, because the outcome, the Supreme Court says, does not matter. It's just the openness that should be even and across the board. So this isn't going to bode well for those states that are creating laws that restrict people in various precincts. The Supreme Court ultimately says it almost doesn't matter, because here we are looking at openness, not outcome.
Hey, Candace, from what I read and what I saw, the Supreme Court also put the ball in Congress's court once again, and President Biden kind of did the same thing. He actually called this ruling harmful and said that Congress can repair the damage. What can they do?
Yes. Well, ultimately, listen, what's on the table is the John
Lewis.
Another Voting Rights Act. Thank you. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And
HR1.
So ultimately, we're looking at that so that people can come together, galvanize, and really put back some of these prerequisites so that if states do pass laws, they have to get pre-clearance, and that's what the John Lewis Voting Rights Act has set out, and that was removed by the Supreme Court. This whole idea of pre-clearance and the idea that you have to go one step before ultimately, putting a law on the book. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act would essentially put that back, and that's what everyone is counting on to happen.
Candace, were you surprised, and I know we have something else, but were you surprised that Justice Alito, I believe, mentioned the F word, fraud? Like, the big lie has made it all the way up the chain, and he spoke to states and their interest in preventing fraud.
I'm not surprised because, see, this is essentially what the former president has been leading these justices to believe. They might say that they are nonpartisan and that politics does not play in this, but we see that this has been split in party lines, right? This 6-3 decision. So we know that they're listening to the former president. We know that that the president has been in their ear. So the fact that they think that there's fraud, it is not surprising because this is someone who is aligned with the former president. So it makes sense that he would say that. I can't believe that he said it because the word fraud, though, does indicate that you are working on partisan lines. So I think that it was an eye-opener in terms of where we're going. And let's not be fooled by these unanimous decisions that might seem a little bit progressive and liberal in terms of other rights. Here we have the real deal when it comes to voting, because we're not just talking about voting. It makes sense. And so I wasn't surprised by it at all.
They faked this out.
So Trump has been screaming about fraud when it comes to voting rights, but then his company gets indicted on fraud charges, at least his CFO, Alan Weisselberg. Involve off-the-book compensation. What are some of those examples? What are they talking about there?
All right, so we're talking about free housing. We're talking about free cars, Mercedes. We're talking about this whole idea that your son or daughter can go to an expensive private school off the books. You don't have to pay any taxes on it because you've given a gift, and you also don't have to pay any taxes on it if you're the Trump organization because you've excluded it from payroll. So on both ends, these are the things that we're talking about. And this is a big deal. It may not seem like a big deal because of the fact that Weisselberg could possibly not go to jail, but he also is looking at 15 years too. So when we look at all of the implications and what could come out with this is a very big deal. I can assure you that the former president is rocking in his boots because he is waiting for the next shoe to drop. It has his name on it.
Does that mean that he, obviously it's his company, that's his CFO, should he know what he was doing there? How could it reach Donald Trump? How can this touch Donald J. Trump? That's what everybody wants to know.
Yes. Well, listen, this is a very small operation. Donald Trump, we know, likes to deal with loyal people in groups of 4 and 5. Many of those 4 and 5 are often his children. But we also know that Alan Weisselberg has been around for 50 years. He knows everything. He makes decisions about what pins to buy at the office, according to reports. So he's very detailed and in deep in terms of all the details. And because he's so deep, he's the one that prosecutors want to speak. And that's ultimately the goal here. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if they made a deal with him at the end of the day to say, listen, you tell us, well, we know where 50 bodies are buried, but if you know where our 100 are, we'll let you tell us where that is because that means more to us. So at this point, I think that they're going in a situation. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office, the AG office of New York, is making the determination and trying to figure out how do we get this man to turn. And that's why it's important that the former president be on notice that he's next, because this guy knows where all of the bodies are buried.
Exactly, Candace. They don't need 50 bodies.
We're waiting on him.
They want one body.
That phone call in Georgia.
One big body. Exactly. Keep it going. Keep going. We'll see what happens there. One main body. That's what they're looking for right now. Candace Kelley, we appreciate you. Thank you so much. Enjoy your weekend.